khờ hay đấy là mình phải mở cái này kia xong rồi mình phải làm cái case.
Gì đâu em thấy thầy gửi bao nhiêu file không? Mấy chục file ấy.
Sao mà em biết được?
Nó vài chục file. Làm sao mà em biết được nó nằm
cái nào? Em nghĩ là phải học xong rồi làm thì nó mới mình mới hiểu được.
Mình dùng cái chiêu á, cái tạo ấn tượng này nhớ. Ví dụ như nó trước bố cả không, thật ra nó cũng có tác dụng chứ mình cũng nhận.
Không, ý là nếu mà em thật sự là có rất là extra time á thì ok. Nhưng mà còn bây giờ em đang trong giai đoạn mà em vừa update pricing, em vừa cái này mà giống như là
nên là dòng ưu tiên là
thì
nè, chị Linh nè, bà si nhược cơ hải luôn.
sao bảo làm gì đâu.
Si nhược luôn, ăn không nổi luôn.
Cho em hỏi là ngày mai mình có phải đi học không?
Thầy đi du lịch mình đi học lịch.
Anh bị lây đúng không? Anh bị lây sự lo lắng từ bộ chủ bộ lạc quan đúng không?
Anh biết
em bữa em lên Facebook cái thấy bình thường có cái tức là scholarship thân cờ ở chỉ cái đó không? Đó, toàn em đổi em thấy tự nhiên cái kèn này nó kèn bị toxic á. Cái là mấy đứa học cấp bé nó cũng hỏi một câu rất bình thường thôi là do em muốn cái em muốn apply cái đó nhưng mà em không biết bắt đầu từ đâu hết, nên chị có thể hướng dẫn em được không? Cái nên hỏi vậy thôi à. Cái bạn nói là mấy anh chị á, ai cũng đi làm nó không có thời gian đâu em muốn hỏi cái gì đó thì sẽ phải tìm hiểu trước, em hỏi thẳng vô cái vấn đề là em không biết khúc nào chứ không phải em hỏi gì vậy nữa thì không hỏi chị trả lời em tụi chị cũng đi làm chứ không phải là hướng dẫn viên nhưng mà tư vấn tụi chị làm cái muốn ý này thì tư vấn là biết thì nói với em bỏ rồi nó cái là cái nó em biết những cái gì không đúng
đến khi ban thư bình thường cũng happy xong đến một ngày phải đi vô xin nhật.
Em nghĩ là hết kỳ này á, hết kỳ này cái tận rồi
nhớ cái đoạn bắt đầu còn nhìn
năng lượng
đi tung ta tung tăng
cái hồi chiều đó mà em đổ bệnh nó lại ngồi đến thư viện luôn.
xong giờ mới đi đâu cầm cái bịch thuốc thì nó khổ gì không nhưng cái đâu lúc nào tới lúc này lúc nào chưa
cái tuổi đó lúc mà sức khỏe nó sập nhanh vậy không biết đâu thì còn trẻ đây đã trải qua rồi.
Em bao hỏi dai là hiểu rồi. Cái này được thiếu
ngủ ngày nào cũng thấy
Ngủ tới 7 giờ vậy mình thức.
ngủ nhưng mà ý là anh không hiểu cái quá
8 giờ chứ.
có quá trình người ta ngủ nó không có được mượt mà hiểu không? Cái là nó phải nằm xuống là em ngủ liền nè. Là con người lúc nào cũng mất rất nhiều thời gian để mà nó đi vô được giấc ngủ.
Làm gì suy nghĩ nhiều.
Không, từ nhỏ luôn là anh em nói kia là
vậy là em nhớ ấy, hay là không chị giống em ta.
Chị cũng bị một cái là em còn bị một cái là nếu như em đặt báo thức đó là em sẽ không ngủ được luôn. Chỉ cần đặt cái báo thức thôi là em sẽ không ngủ được luôn.
Nhiều thường em không có đặt báo thức.
Đúng rồi, em tự dậy. Em tự dậy thành là mẹ em cứ vậy nè, chạy ra gì nè. Mấy giờ rồi con ngủ dậy đó. Mày không biết học hả? Đấy con.
Không, vậy là em phải đặt báo thức ăn cơm thì em mới dễ ngủ.
Đúng rồi, em không có đặt báo thức. Nên là có bữa đi sớm thì sớm, có bữa đi cả cái mẹ đó. Rồi do không đặt báo thức. Rồi đặt báo thức rồi em thức luôn. Không ngủ luôn. Là chưa cần nó báo lại nó thức rồi. Thì không biết người làm. niềm tin như vậy.
Thôi thì học
Mà cái là chỉ một cái thương hiệu, cái mục đích của nó là làm gì á? Có nghĩa là có một cái đánh giá về năng lực của cộng.
giáo viên này là
Mình nghĩ ngược lại. Em cô kiểu vậy. Em nghĩ là mình dẫn em cô dạy.
Cái hồi sáng em với anh ruột em rất kiểu mất niềm tin như lại kiểu như trong một phát biểu đấy thì nó là mình được nghỉ, nhưng mà em với anh ruột em sợ là sẽ có một cái plot twist nào đó kiểu như là chỉ có mình em với ổng nghĩ thôi mà mọi người
Tức là xác nhận cái cách
đúng rồi, không biết là như vậy nó làm gì mất niềm tin đó. Bộ trưởng bộ lại quay được mất niềm tin luôn.
còn mình nói nói gì bây giờ thì đâu còn mới lại
Yeah, let's go on. Okay, so our last example, basically focusing on earnings per share, tells us that some people it is not, sometimes it is not value gains, but instead managerial objectives. Yeah? They believe that the analysts or the shareholders love that earnings per share increases. You just can't miss anything. So managers basically may have more incentives. Yeah? Maybe they just look at accounting figures like earnings per share and do something that do not create value. But sometimes they simply are what we call empire builders. And many managers have to have a large empire, many employees, a large company. Yeah. Managers may simply merge because they become so big, like Time Warner, that they become too big to be taken over. Yeah. So basically size is not for synergies, size is just to prevent being taken over. Yeah. And then there were these hubris hypothesis, overconfidence hypothesis. Managers simply believe they have an extremely profitable firm and they believe that this is only because they are genius. And then they think they can export this genius to other corporations, and then they buy underperforming corporations and believe that they can simply turn them into crown jewels and to make them profitable again. That is quite often not the case. And in M&A we should not forget, managers do not act in the interest of shareholders. Managers have their own objective function, and that may suffer from all kinds of things. They may love stable returns. They may love their independence. They may love influence and size of the corporation, and all kinds of different things. And in the case of Time, of course, we saw that the share price went down after the announcement. And the typical explanation is, these are managers that basically have other motives than value creation. They want to prevent to be taken over themselves. They are doing an acquisition although the price of the share goes down. And this price reduction by 5% that we saw is rather typical. On average, it is around zero, 1% was on the slide. But there are many cases where we have shareholder declines of the bidding firm, and overpayment, being overconfident, buying this for bad reasons is quite often one reason. We saw that the takeover synergies must be enough. In the Time Warner case, that would be profitable for Time only if the market believed in high synergies. Then the market price will go up. We saw that the market actually was rather skeptical and expected only small synergies, 260 million. And in the end, you need investment bankers and you need the commitment to really produce these synergies. Today, when we have mergers, quite often there are very detailed commitments. I will fire 500 people in that factory. I will close this factory and the production is transformed to this. And these kind of precise promises are, of course, easy to see whether they are fulfilled or not. And then managers basically commit themselves to do this, and only in few circumstances then they don't meet these things. If a manager promises that the cost-to-income ratio, for example, will go down by 5%, quite often they will do everything to make this happen, because it has been promised to the stock market. And then, of course, something is becoming self-fulfilling prophecy. The manager for many years tried to reduce the cost, but it simply doesn't work. Then she makes a takeover offer, promises to the market the cost-to-income ratio will go down by 5%. Everybody in the corporation understands if we can't reach this topic, the promise is broken, the manager will be fired. And maybe then this will ultimately become true. In the early times, in the 90s or the 80s, this was just a promise. The time management simply believed, if we combine with Warner, all kind of happy, beautiful things will happen, but they were not very precise in what exactly would happen. And if you do this kind of announcement today, the stock price would go down immediately. Because people realize you don't promise anything, you only hope, and that is obviously very bad. So investment bankers basically today will calculate everything through, and you have a very detailed plan of what you do, and then basically you have to execute this. We have this already. Offers can be a cash or stock, and can be a tender offer. And if you pay with shares, of course, you need to specify the exchange ratio. This is nothing new to you, so we can jump over this quite quickly, and we also jump over this merger arbitrage because it's not really necessary. We now want to go to a very old book by Burl and Means, 1932. If you look at the publishing date, this is 3 years after 1929. And 1929 should also for you be a date that you know. This was the beginning of the large stock market crash in the United States. And as a result of the stock market crash, we had a great depression all in the Western world. We had mass unemployment. And one last result in 1933 was that the Germans elected Adolf Hitler to become the Chancellor, because they said, we are in such a bad shape, only a man like Adolf Hitler can rescue us. Without this Great Depression, I think the Nazi regime in Germany would never have happened. People were in real despair. So this is a book that explains why the economy is not running. And basically Mr. Burl and Mr. Means said that the problem of the modern corporation is that managers who are agents do the decisions, but shareholders are the owners, they bear the consequences. So the shareholders, for example, want the manager to work hard, but the manager prefers to work not at all. So the manager prefers to fly first class and to have an own business jet. The shareholder wants the manager to be to save money and do not waste money. So there were lots of things where there was obvious conflicts of interest. And then Burl and Means say, why should managers work hard and do not spend too much money of the corporation and act in the interest of shareholders? Probably only if there is money coming. If there is somebody who really watches them closely and then comes to the shareholder meeting and says, this guy is spends too much money, he doesn't work hard enough, and all that kind of thing, we should replace them. Yeah? But if you have thousands of small shareholders, actually nobody cares. Yeah? Monitoring is producing information. Information is a public good. Yeah? You bear the cost or bear the benefits. Yeah? There is no incentive to do so. Yeah? So you may say you need something, some mechanism in order to prevent managers from basically becoming self-confident and managers pursue their own interest. If you have dispersed ownership, the managers have too much discussion, and they do something like empire building, they buy Warner, although it doesn't make any sense. There was entrenchment, for example, you use the corporate resources in order to buy an airplane for the boss, or whatsoever, for consumption. And Gordon Bean actually stopped at that point and said, and look, this is why we have such a bad recession. American capitalism started quite well in the 1880s, 1890s. We built the railroads, we built the steel industry, everything was fine. But in 1929, everything collapsed simply because we did overlook one thing, that there is no mechanism to control managers. And then Henry Mann, in 1965, actually said, but the takeover market, this is our rescue. The market for corporate control, basically, he argued corporate control is something that you have or that you don't have and you can trade it. So if there was a bad manager, then there was some other manager who wants to basically take over his control, and they compete for control. And the idea is, in a badly managed company, you don't actually need an acquirer, like Time or Paramount. All you need is a competing management team that comes to the shareholders and say, vote for me. It's like in democracy when you vote for the next government. There were competing parties, and you make your vote and basically vote for the best party. And so the best management team hopefully wins and replaces the old management team. And now we do a little bit of mathematics, but it's really stupid and simple mathematics. But it gives you a little bit of an introduction. There was a big theory of M&A, and it comes from agency theory, game theory, and there were hundreds or even thousands of theoretical articles that basically show, model in a mathematical way the outcome of takeover activity, and basically then show that if you change the laws, if you have under other shareholder structures, that the outcome of M&A transactions will change, and then look whether this is a good or bad change. So these three theoretical papers basically start with I as being the incumbent manager. So he is in power. And in this case, he is observable of type, so everybody knows precisely what's going on. In many models, you say there could be good and bad managers. We don't know whether he is a good or bad guy. We can only guess. But here the model is really simple. And then he is modeled as being Xi and Zi. So Xi are the security benefits, and Zi are the private benefits. So this model actually assumes that if the incumbent manager is in place, he gets some private benefits. That may be the corporate jet. That may be whatever he takes out of the firm. And X is going to the shareholders. And when I saw this the first time, I was really surprised by the Z. Because usually we always think about, there was profits, and these profits are paid out as dividends, or they are retained. But the fact that managers receive private benefits from this is, of course, quite novel. But that's actually the basis of all this industry. And for simplicity, there were no shareholders' holdings, so of course you can ask him to hold shares, and then this will affect his decision making. And then comes Rader, and he also, he has his own private benefits. Yeah, when he takes over, yeah, he can also steal some corporate resources and enjoy whatever he likes to enjoy, and he has higher or smaller security benefits. When he runs the firm, yeah, there is more or less dividends to be paid out to the investors. Yeah? And he can simply offer a bid price B for the shares, and he then says, yeah, if I get 50%, yeah, with 50% I have control, and please accept the price B. Yeah, then there is a takeover cost of C in this model, and also it is assumed that the raider does not own any shares before. And then the question is, yeah, are bad managers replaced by new managers? So at G2, sorry, one moment later, yeah, shareholders choose in a non-corporate manner. Yeah, if you study game theory, they could first all sit together and agree on something and all commit. We say yes, we say no. Non-cooperatively means every shareholder for himself decides whether to say yes or no. Yeah, and we assume passivity. Yeah, that means no defense. Yeah, maybe there is some defense in these models. Usually you have some reactions. That is possible. Yeah, so keep it really as simple as possible. The manager, the incumbent manager, can do nothing after the takeover offer. Only the shareholders decide. And yeah, if the raider receives more than 50%, he will run the firm, and otherwise the incumbent will continue to run the firm. Yeah? And under these very simple conditions, yeah, the case is really simple. Yeah, you don't have to run any mathematics. Bad managers will be simply wiped out. Yeah? So assume that the incumbent manager runs the firm, yeah, and the stock price is XE. Yeah, so this is always a very, very simplified model. Yeah, the firm only once in a life pays out XI. Yeah, there is no discounting, yeah, so the value of the shares is simply XI. And because there is no forward-looking stake, the investors of that company do not anticipate that there could be a raider coming up. Yeah, they expect that the company is run by XI and will stay to be run by XI. Yeah, otherwise the share price would not be XI. Yeah, and now, completely unanticipated, yeah, because of the high ability, R is coming, and his security benefits, yeah, the dividends that the company will pay out is bigger than the incumbents, and there is a shareholder value increase. Yeah, this delta X is nothing else than if the new raider runs the firm, yeah, by assumption he will generate a higher profit for the shareholders. And actually we have no idea whether it could be that his private benefits are bigger or smaller than the other firm's private benefits. Yeah? Actually, in the modeling, yeah, we could also put some emphasis on this. Yeah? There were managers that enjoy more the airplane or whatsoever, but that's actually not important here at all. Yeah? If somebody can run the firm more efficiently, yeah, the outcome of the tender offer is very clear. You just bid a bid price that is above the current share price. Yeah? The majority of the shareholders, all shareholders, will say B is better than XI. Will sell the shares. Yeah? The raider, of course, still has to pay C. Yeah? And in order to break even, the bid price must not be too close to XR, yeah? Because otherwise he would not make a profit. But the raider takes over, reorganize the firm, and the profit is XR minus B. Yeah, this is what, to be precise, he buys 50% of the firm. Yeah, he buys 50% of the firm at B. Yeah, its ultimate value will be XR. And so 50% of this is the profit, and he still pays C. Yeah, so after deducting C, this will be his ultimate profit. And the shareholders, of course, get a benefit, yeah, because B is bigger. Yeah? So this very stupid and little model basically shows you that in this extremely simplified example, tender offers are sufficient to wipe out bad managers, yeah, whenever some raider comes and can produce higher dividends. He will be able to offer a higher price B than the current share price, and he will simply take over. And the model is actually too simple to be called a model, but you see that there were already a number of assumptions. Yeah? For example, the share price was not forward-looking. Yeah? The share price was only XI, yeah? Although there could be a takeover offer of B. Yeah? And if you expect a takeover offer of B with some probability, the share price is higher even before. Yeah? And maybe then you have to pay an even higher price for the takeover. Yeah? The model assumes that there is symmetric information. Everybody knows everything, yeah? Which is of course not the case. Yeah? The raider may simply promise higher dividends, but not be able to deliver them. Yeah? Incumbent managers may say, I have much more experience, this new guy doesn't know the firm, how can he promise higher dividends? Yeah, this is also completely ruled out. And we assume that whenever you offer something that is bigger than the share price, yeah, then the shareholders take the benefit and sell their shares. And in 10 minutes roughly, we will see that this may not be the case. Yeah, that this may be a wrong assumption. Yeah, because shareholders basically decide differently. Yeah, let's keep this open for a minute. Yeah? But the idea is really, in the Henry Mann fashion, incompetent or bad managers are replaced by using tender offers. The raider comes and sees he can manage the firm better than the incumbent, and simply by launching a tender offer, he can make this happen. So the tender offer is enough, and in contrast to a merger, it allows to circumvent incumbent management. Yeah? The big thing is you don't have to ask the manager. Yeah? If you ask the manager, do you like to be taken over? Clearly not. Yeah? Because the incumbent manager loses his job and loses his private benefits of control, whatever this is. Yeah? And the tender offer is necessary in order to basically make this happen. Yeah? And Henry Mann basically said, as long as it is easy and not too costly to make this tender offer, and as long as information is transparent, everybody knows all the relevant things, then we can basically be confident that our corporations will be run by competent managers. And if they are too lazy, if they have wrong incentives, they will simply be wiped out. So, so tender offers in this theory are really a powerful governance mechanism. They discipline bad managers. By discipline, they wipe them out. They replace them by better managers. It's just a mechanism to replace bad managers by good managers, and bad and good simply means high or low dividends. Nothing else. And shareholders basically sell their corporate control right. Every shareholder has one vote, but if you have 50% of the votes, then you are in power, and you can replace the manager. And the tender offer is necessary in order to have this ownership concentration. If shareholders observe there is a stupid manager, he produces only small dividends, they can't do anything because they all have only one vote. But if there is a raider who can buy the whole corporation or 50% of it, then he has control and can wipe out the manager. And the precondition is, of course, to have raiders that have enough financial resources to do so. In the real world, in Vietnam, there was nobody who could acquire VinFast, even if VinFast is poorly managed and the manager should be replaced. Simply because nobody is rich enough to do this. access to financial resources is not even discussed here. Yeah? It's simply assumed that they are available. Yeah? Henry Mann calls this a market for corporate control. Yeah? Because he thinks the raider and the incumbent manager are simply fighting for the control. Yeah? And if the raider has better arguments, yeah, a higher dividend, yeah, then he should be able, yeah, to take over the firm, and that basically cures the old Burrow-Means problem, yeah, that directors basically pursue their self-interest and do not care about shareholders. Yeah, and so we basically focus on two benefits, yeah, ex post, bad managers are replaced. Yeah, and what we also want to study, that ex ante, the threat of takeover, threatens incumbent managers and maybe lets them behave differently. Yeah, in the model so far, we have no behavioral choice. Yeah, the manager was simply there and produced dividends. Yeah, but we could think that the manager works either hard or not hard, or that the manager pursues one or the other investment strategy, and then it would basically affect its behavior. Yeah? So ex ante always means that behavior or decisions are affected and hopefully to the better. So let's see how this could work by modifying this framework a little bit. And let's assume that the manager can freely choose his private benefits. Yeah? And the modeling idea is really very, very simple. Yeah? Let's assume that there is that the value of that company basically is like a pot of money, and there were $100 in there. And that's the value of the firm. And now the incumbent basically can freely decide, I pay 80 to the shareholders and 20, that is ZE, and that is XE to the shareholders. Yeah? Or they can say 30 for me, 70 for the shareholders. Yeah? So whatever, yeah, there is 100 in the pot, whatever he pays, what he pays out to the shareholders is gone, and the rest is his own private benefit. Yeah? The modeling idea is really very simple. Yeah? An amount of money, yeah, maybe $100, is simply divided between the shareholders and the manager decides who to give it. Yeah? It's like a dictator, yeah, that collects all the taxes from the people in the country and then decides on, yeah, shall I take the taxes and build a nice castle, or should I take the taxes and give it back to my population in order to build bridges or to help the poor people and so forth. Yeah, so this incumbent manager is really kind of a dictator, yeah, that basically takes or leaves the corporate resources. Yeah? And of course, if he anticipates a tender offer by the raider, yeah, then if he takes too much out of the firm, yeah, if he says, yeah, if he's really greedy and says, yeah, 50 for me, yeah, and only 50 left over for the shareholders, then of course the raider comes, and the tender offer is maybe 70, and he's out. Yeah? And of course, if he knows what the raider will offer, yeah, if he knows what the raider can offer, he will basically limit his consumption, yeah, his private benefits, in order to prevent being taken over. Yeah? And then we have a real choice variable. Yeah? The incumbent manager decides, yeah, what amount of money do I take for myself and what do I leave for the shareholders. Yeah? And this decision is, of course, sounds like a very, very easy receipt to steal other people's money, yeah? Because in the end we believe that the firm belongs to the shareholders. Yeah, and this looks like stealing money. Yeah, but the papers basically say, even if it is like this, yeah, as long as there is a raider, yeah, there is a limit. Yeah? If you take too much money out of the firm, then basically the incumbent manager comes, and then basically the biggest step E that you can do is this amount of money. So, yeah, this little theory tells us that the threat of a raider coming and offering something limits the ability of the incumbent manager to basically steal shareholders' money and take it out. And the manager, not because it's forbidden, not because he may be penalized by the police, but only because the raider will come. Yeah? He restricts himself from taking out the money. Yeah, and in the end, of course, yeah, this corporate raider and the possibility to raise a bid means that the agency costs that come from the separation of ownership of control, yeah, this overall means topic, that these costs are reduced. Yeah, takeover mechanisms is basically an important economic mechanism in order to cure the deficit that public corporations have. Yeah? The deficit is that managers do not act or cannot be expected to act in the interest of shareholders. Yeah? And if they don't, yeah, by stealing corporate assets, they will be replaced. Very simple. Yeah, this is the theory. Yeah, a very strange theory. Yeah, when I saw this the first time, I thought, well, how are managers modeled here? Yeah, like evil monsters, yeah, that are greedy, yeah, and that have no reluctance, yeah, in basically stealing corporate assets if they can. And it's amazing that yeah, there are basically hundreds of professors, yeah, working with these kind of models. Yeah, in these models, yeah, the manager, yeah, if real-world managers would know how they are modeled in these models, they would say, sorry, that's not me. that's some really evil people that is 100% egoistic, and it's not a good description of the real world. That's what real world people would say. Yeah, but nonetheless, this kind of modeling is the predominant way to model this, and based on these models, basically people conclude whether it makes sense to allow some, for example, some defense weapons. Yeah, the corporate law has lots of different rules, yeah, that determine what managers and what raiders can do and what they must not do. Yeah, and all these rules, of course, should ideally follow from economic modeling. Yeah, that some people basically said it makes sense, yeah, to have this rule in the corporate law. Yeah? And the people that are active in the industry basically shape the legislation, and yeah, they use this kind of argumentation. Yeah, and then on the next slides, basically, we want to question whether the market for corporate control really operates that simple. Yeah, in the simple model, everybody knows everything. Yeah, whenever a raider can make some money, yeah, she just pops in, takes over the firm, yeah, and there are value improvements, and everybody is better off. Yeah, this is a very positive view on the market for corporate control. Yeah, in the beginning, I said some people believe that this is mainly there for making investment bankers rich, yeah, and to protect bad managers from being taken over, like the time manager. Yeah, here, this is a purely positive view. Yeah. Hostile takeovers are necessary in order to replace bad managers by good managers, or in order to restrain managers from taking too much out of the firm, yeah, from expropriating private benefits that are too high. Yeah, and yeah, in the modern theory, there are basically many discussions. When the American believe, yeah, that the market of corporate control is their most important mechanism on how to control conflicts of interest, yeah, and how to make sure that shareholder value is in the center of the interest of firms. But this way of American capitalism may be not the best way to do it. Yeah, and other countries have found other mechanisms. Yeah, the problem is the same in every country. Yeah, if you have a manager, he will have his own interest, yeah, and not only serve the shareholders' interest. Yeah. but takeovers are one out of many mechanisms. Yeah, and for many people, for some people this is a good mechanism, and other people argue it's a rather bad mechanism. Yeah, so let's think about more why this could be a bad mechanism. Yeah, first of all, takeovers are extremely costly. Yeah, and with frictions mean, in the real world we have information asymmetry. Not everybody knows the same thing. Yeah? So even a value increasing takeover may not happen simply because shareholders simply don't know what to choose. Yeah, so many promises, a higher share price, but where should we know whether this will actually happen? Some people say takeovers may exacerbate, increase, make stronger agency conflicts rather than terminating them. Consider Time example. Time had the problem that the manager had other different interests than the shareholders. The shareholders wanted 175, the manager wanted to keep his job. And the takeover was used as a mechanism not to serve the shareholders but to serve his own interests. So when some people argue takeovers are the means to make shareholders stronger, here in this example it was the means to make the manager stronger. So the conflict between the shareholders and the managers was not alleviated or solved. It was actually how is this word? Exception. This is complex, complicated English word. So let's look on some more things. If we think about the overall role, I think, and particularly here from Vietnam, you may know that M&A is a hot topic, and that many people make a lot of money in M&A, but of course you have no idea what the economic importance of this actually is. And if you just realize that roughly 1/3 of the Fortune 500, of the biggest firms in the United States, have been taken over in the 80s alone, then you see that the takeover market is really a massive, a very influential and important market. Enormous amounts of money changes hands there. 40% of all publicly traded firms, predominantly the larger ones, received a hostile takeover at some point during the 80s. So almost every corporation needed to prepare. Only the very biggest basically are too big to be taken over. But in the 80s, with more effective capital markets, raiders. Before the 80s, basically, people thought it was impossible to raise billions of dollars in order to buy a large corporation. And in the 80s, all of a sudden, private people bought companies for 30 billion, which was just unthinkable. And used the bond markets for this. And the very largest hostile takeovers were hostile and were deeply discussed in the press. So this seems to be evidence that the Burmese or the Henry Mann story of the market for corporate control is really active. There was a battle for control. Market for corporate control is actually the idea that the incumbent management and the raider, they fight for corporate control, and hopefully the manager that creates more shareholder value basically wins. And in the 80s at least, it looked like this is basically all the action. Everybody can be affected, even the largest firm, and many are actually taken over. So this is a very important kind of mechanism. But we should not forget, most M&A transactions are friendly. And this model that we had is basically hostile by nature. The incumbent manager wants to stay because he receives private benefits by assumption. The raider fights and leads a tender offer. And in this model, basically friendly negotiated transactions do not have any place. Yeah? When two managers friendly negotiate for a merger like Time and Warner, yeah, then there was another story behind this. In the 90s, when the total acquisition volume in the United States was still above, or was far above the 80s, there were only a few wholesale bids. Actually, the wholesale bids that we will see in a minute decreased a lot. In Europe, we have almost no wholesale bids. There were 52, I think. The Mannesmann is the most famous one. Mannesmann was very, very hostile. It was almost like war in the press. But this was the exception. Many countries basically have almost only friendly deals, and therefore they do not seem to fit the model. If you contested tender offers is just another name for hostile. Very active in the 70s and 80s, and then going down then at the end of the century. And the interpretation of this evidence depends on who is judging on this. You may say managers do no longer enjoy private benefits, or managers have been effectively disciplined, that there was no need anymore for this. But my tendency is actually legal changes have made it almost impossible, the hostile takeover. What is not here yet written down is defense. If you are threatened by a hostile takeover, you think about how can I prevent this. The Time case was difficult. The only effective way was to take over Warner with lots of money, and then Time was so big that it would not be taken over. But in reality, there were much more effective things. Poison pill was mentioned. This is a defense weapon. Incumbent managers in the United States can do a lot of things, basically to make it impossible to take this company over. And maybe the decline of takeovers was not because the problem disappeared, but because the solution was no longer valid. Corporate rating became more and more impossible. And then came a very famous article in 1980 by Grossman and Hart, and they basically said the model by Henry Mann, the model that we just saw, is actually a bad model because there is a little problem with it. And let's look at the Grossman-Hart problem. It's one of the classic applications of game theory to takeovers. And it's not difficult, the model, but again, it's not the mathematics that makes the difficulty, it's only the logic. So we really have to think sharp about this. So Grossman-Hart basically said, if a waiter comes and he can increase the firm value, so xi is the current firm value, and he wants to increase it to xi. And then he offers a price right in the middle, and will the shareholders sell? And conventionally we say the current price is xi, somebody makes a nice offer that is above this, shareholders will love to have b because b is bigger than xi, and then of course the waiter takes over and makes a profit. And Grossman-Hart said, sorry, you didn't think that through. And they said there was a free rider problem in this argument. Let's see how this really works. So, transfer of control, according to Grossman-Hart, is a public good since each shareholder prefers all others to tender. Everybody wants to take over because then the share price goes up to XR, the waiter's value. But if it's really a public good, because everybody profits from this, then there is under provision of this public good. All the economists here may hopefully know that public goods are underproduced. What is a classical public good? If you provide information, and you can't sell this information, it's just on the internet. Everybody can read it, nobody pays for this, then of course we have little reason to produce this information. Yeah? If we can contribute to a cleaner environment, yeah, we pay all the cost, but the benefits are shared with all the others. Yeah? A clean environment is also a private good. Yeah, and public control is also a sort of public good. Yeah? So let's have the same setting as before, and assume actually that there is no private benefits for the rater. I actually don't know why this is for. Yeah. And then the rater offers a bid price that is in between the old price of the incumbent and the value that is offered. Yeah. And the simple question is, do shareholders accept such an offer? And the situation is, of course, that there are many, in this model, infinitely many very small shareholders. And the argument of Grossman Hart is actually very simple. Yeah? The small shareholders say, maybe the offer succeeds, maybe the offer fails. I don't know. I'm so small I can't affect this. Yeah? It's like I have only one vote out of millions of votes. Yeah? So my voting doesn't change the result. Yeah? But one thing is what I know. Yeah? If it fails, the stock price will stay where it is. Yeah, will stay low at Xi. Yeah. If it's successful and I tender my share, I get B. But if I retain my share, I get XR. Yeah, because the rater only needs 50%. Yeah, then he has control. Yeah. So the better thing is to hope to get up to XR. Yeah. Grossman Hart simply argued shareholders will not sell their shares. Yeah, they hope that all the other shareholders tender their shares. Yeah, but for every individual investor, it is more interesting to stick to their shares. Yeah, and then basically get XR, yeah, the price that the bidder receives. Yeah, do you all agree to this? Because this is really a central part. Yeah, this is. It actually means that the only bid that can be successful is that the price B is leveled up to XR. Yeah? If you increase the bid price to XR, yeah, then of course all shareholders will agree, yeah, because they can't do better, but that means that the corporate rater cannot make any profit anymore. Yeah? Then the corporate rater has a lot of cost with it. Yeah? He must investigate the thing, he must pay his investment bankers, yeah? And the profit basically goes down to zero. Yeah? And yeah, I find this a very provoking kind of result, yeah? Because basically it says the small shareholders, yeah, that have only one vote each, yeah, and that cannot affect anything. Yeah? It's like you are voting in a democratic political election. Yeah? You vote for Trump or you vote for sorry? Yeah. Yeah, you feel powerless, yeah, because you have only one vote of many. Yeah? And the corporate rater, he's a rich person, he is so powerful, yeah? He made billions of money in the past, yeah? And he is all of a sudden forced to basically pay the maximum price, yeah, left without a profit. Yeah? Simply because the shareholder is extremely powerful, because you say, dear rater, if you bid B and B is still below XR, sorry, but I prefer then to stick to my share. Yeah? You offer me a nice premium of 50%, that's not enough, yeah? Because the true value increase is 60%. Yeah? And I will only tender my shares if I get the maximum payout. Yeah? And this is not greediness. Yeah? The shareholders are not greedy, they are simply rational. Yeah? They say, I prefer XR over B, and I don't care whether I receive this one. Yeah? So the dominant strategy to choose is I choose retain my share as long as B is not equal to XR. Yeah? And so Grossman Hart basically says that the nice story of Angry Man, yeah, that the market of corporate control works in order to replace bad managers, has a logical deficit. If you have if you have to bid that high, and if you also have to pay some costs, then the overall profit will be negative. Yeah? If you can't make a profit on the transaction, you still pay the cost, so you end with a deficit. Yeah? The pro rata is not the rich man that kills American jobs. Yeah? He is rather a poor man that can only make successful transactions when he is making losses and basically no bids are undertaken. So, yeah, this model obviously does not have strong support by the empirical side. Yeah, we saw all these hostile takeovers. So maybe these shareholders were simply too stupid. Yeah, in the 80s when we saw all these hostile takeovers, yeah, maybe it was because people were just stupid, yeah, and accepting bad offers, yeah, leaving a lot of profit for the raiders. Yeah, and after reading Grossman Hart, they said, "Oh, sorry, we were so stupid. We always say no to the bids now." And then basically the market for hostile takeovers came to a standstill. Yeah, but honestly, my thesis is differently. My personal, I'm convinced that the legal changes killed basically hostile takeovers. The legal changes in the US made it very easy for the incumbent managers to defend themselves, and that basically made the hostile takeovers less effective. And the other thing is, I'm convinced that almost every friendly takeover is actually hostile. Because when two firms merge, there was always at least one person who said, "I would prefer no merger." But unfortunately, I have to close my mouth, and I was not asked. And I need to say yes to this because otherwise I'm wiped out. Don't expect the people to be really friendly. These slides seem to assume that if you have friendly negotiated takeovers, then basically the utility of the managers is maximized. But today, we have institutional investors and especially private equity funds, and they are highly professional. This world here is, we have small and stupid shareholders. They have not a capability to monitor the managers, they have no clue whether the managers are entrenched and steal the corporate money, and they rely on corporate raiders. Today, we have highly professional institutional investors, we have private equity funds, we have active investors, hedge funds. They all basically look out for corporations that are badly managed, and then basically buy significant fractions of the share and basically force the managers to do something. If a manager is not working hard, is not working well, he may be easily replaced just by enough shareholders basically voting him out of the job. So if you do not serve the shareholders' interest, the idea the incumbent manager is like a king and cannot be threatened. Only the raider can come, like a warrior, and kick him out of the thing, and the shareholders have no say. That is, I think, a completely wrong picture. And large institutional shareholders in particular play a big role. I think this will come. See, this will not come, but later on. I just tell you, in countries like Germany, a large part of the stock listed companies are, of course, family firms, as I told you. So BMW has a large shareholder called the Quandt family. And of course, the Quandt family actively monitors the management. And whenever the management is a bad manager, he will be wiped out. If you buy a BMW stock on the market, you basically know that you have no power, all the power is with the family, but you hope that the family will basically throw out bad managers and you rely on their activity. You can trust this mechanism, and it's a completely different mechanism. It's a large shareholder, in this case the family. In other cases, even if you don't have a family, but whenever a company is badly managed, some hedge funds buy in, start a press campaign, and then in the next annual meeting, and the manager has to fight in order to get re-elected, and then you see that you don't need 50% to throw people out today. The Grossman Hart basically said, now given that there was a loss for the corporate raider, we must basically give him some extra profit. If we don't give him some private benefit that compensates for the for the cost, there will be no takeover. And then the idea is that the law should basically allow the raider to steal some corporate resources or to do something else for his private benefit. And there were many things that corporate raiders can do in order to benefit personally on the expense of other shareholders. And we don't go into any detail, but this is really nitty-gritty details. But basically the conclusion of the Grossman Hart model is this is not waste. If you allow somebody to take to take some money out here, and you put it to the raider, then you may say, yeah, but this is the compensation that we need in order to keep the M&A thing going on. And one idea, for example, is something really strange. If a company pays out dividend, every shareholder receives the same dividend. That's a basic principle. And now this model proposes that when you get $1 of dividend, the minority shareholders get only a part of this dividend, and phi being the card basically cut off. It's something that is completely against the law, because every stock corporation law says everybody receives the same dividend. But it's of course, it would constitute an extra benefit for the raider, makes raiding more attractive. The surprising thing is, why is this modeled in such a way? That is obviously illegal. And if you ask the theory people that do these kinds of modeling, they say it is a convenient way to model something that exists in reality. And what in reality exists is that the raider basically can take out money out of the firm. But he doesn't do it by paying himself an extra dividend. He has other ways to do this. For example, the raider has another corporation with assets and whatever. And this company here is then basically trading with him. For example, this company needs a headquarter. This raider is also a real estate tycoon, like the owner of VinFast. And he has a property, an office building that he would like to rent out. And the trading is a rental contract, and they pay a very high rent to him. Then basically, it is difficult to argue that this is stealing money. But the raider clearly gets an extra benefit. He collects a very high rent from this company by basically forcing the company to use his own building as a headquarter. And this is what meant with reducing the dividends for the small shareholders and still receiving a high dividend for yourself. There were lots of things happening in the real world where corporate raiders basically benefit at the expense of small shareholders. And I think this office building rented, owned by the raider, is a very good example, because corporate raiders quite often are real estate tycoons. By the way, the company of where my wife works has just been taken over, and they moved the office, and the new office is basically owned by the acquirer, and they pay a very high rent. So this would be a nice, perfect example. The only difference is the company of my wife doesn't have minority shareholders. If there would be minority shareholders, they would suffer. But it is fully owned by the raider, and therefore he is not stealing anybody else's money. but you can easily, take money out of the firm by forcing the firm to sign a high-price rental contract. Yeah, and then you can show that if you can steal enough money from the other people, higher than C, then you can still take over. Yeah, so Grossman-Hart basically says, dear lawyers, should usually try to prevent this kind of thing. High rents paid to the company owned by the raider. This is something that you find is stealing money, but actually it's a fair compensation for the important service that these people do. Yeah, I think we should, maybe we have these two slides yet, and then we are at a natural break. So the raider clearly cannot make a profit of the tendered shares under the assumptions of the model. He has to offer the full value of XR. And therefore, unless the raider gets some other kind of profits or private benefits or rents, however you call this, the takeover will not occur. And the takeover is needed in order to basically create welfare for the society. Because somebody has to kick the bad managers out. And so you may allow him to expect private business. You can allow him to do some kind of dilution, and maximum protection. Protecting shareholders against this high rental price is not in the interest of the shareholders. So the interesting thing is shareholders should be happy to allow the firm basically to be a little bit diluted, to be a little bit ripped off, because the firm benefits from the existence of raiders. And this is quite provocative. This is something that American lawyers found probably surprising, but they accept this view. American legislation is largely driven by this kind of thinking. And so if you want an intuition what is allowed in the United States and what is not, you have to really go into this kind of thinking. And also Donald Trump, by the way, is exactly the same way. If you just find a logical story to support this, then basically all measures, all weapons are allowed. You just need the right model to basically prove that this is needed in order to do the right thing. And here in this model, the raider is always doing the right thing, because he throws out the incumbent manager and increases welfare to XR. Of course, there were other ways how the raider could earn a profit. He could simply buy stakes before the tender offer. We usually say initially the shares are trading at that price, and then they go up to this price. Why? In the tender offer, you are forced to pay this price. But why can't you secretly buy some cheap shares before, maybe 10%? And then enjoy the share price increase of these shares. That is certainly possible, but it's limited by disclosure rules. Once you have accumulated 3 or 5%, the law requires you to disclose this. With a disclosure, you also have to explain whether you plan to buy more shares or not. If you say, I don't buy more shares, then you must not do this. So disclosure rules basically prevent this mechanism to be very important. But in Germany, for example, there are many ways to circumvent this a little bit. And there are examples where raiders made a lot of money simply by buying cheap shares when they were still cheap, and therefore making money elsewhere. The nice thing of this model is that we see that empirically, that all the benefits go to target shareholders and not to acquiring shareholders. And let me get back to our first thing. If you think, why do so many people believe in this kind of theory? And the evidence says target shareholders benefit a lot, but acquiring shareholders, let's put a zero in here. Basically zero. And if you think that well, whales are usually thought as private person, yeah, but whales can be also corporations. Yeah. If the acquirer makes no profit, and the target shareholders, yeah, these small people that do not have anything, they do not work hard, they just vote. If they receive so much, yeah, then it seems to be a confirmation of the Grossman-Hart model. Yeah. So the Grossman-Hart model has abstract and distant from the reality it may be, but the empirical implications seem to be quite okay. Yeah? So when people think what is a good model as a workhorse for policy advice for how to think about these things, yeah? If the model has empirical support, yeah, that may cure bad or oversimplistic assumptions. Okay, so thanks a lot for your audience. You suffered a lot today, and I hope that tomorrow will be completely different when you really work in teams, and I hope you enjoy this. Yeah, please do not hesitate to also contact George if you have questions, yeah, if they're short and quick to answer questions. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the case. Of course, you can also write an email to me. I'm always online, not online on the beach. See you on Monday.